If you want to see behind the scenes of me building my company in public, taking us from the 1.2 million that we did last year in our coaching business up to hopefully $10 million a year by the end of the year, stick around for this video. In this video today, I'm actually going to go through the pre-call process that we use on over 400 book sales calls using iMessage and a platform called SendBlue. If you go through and watch this video, there's a really good chance that you're going to be able to see a big lift in show rate just by modeling and copying what it is that we do inside of our business. So just to kind of show you a quick update on these daily update channels, we have three main sections that we cover. One, YouTube comment Q&A. Drop your questions down below. Happy to go through, answer your questions, and just do Q&A with you about how to help you in your business. Two, we're building and strategizing in public. And three, we're just documenting our growth as we go across these different channels. So first of all, I want to talk about this real fast. Show rate is one of the biggest components of being able to help core booking funnels to have success. So a lot of the time people focus on close rate. And when you look at close rate of most people's coaching businesses, they a lot of the time will quote numbers like 10%, 20%, 15%. All of these numbers have a place and have value, but they're not really the metric that actually matters when it comes to scaling the business. There's actually really just two things that matter, which is how much it costs you to acquire a customer and what actually is the value of that customer. Because if you're buying customers for $2,000 and they're worth $10,000, that's a 5-to-1 return, and your show rate and your close rate could be absolutely terrible, and that business would absolutely print money. And so what's important here is to make sure that we're playing the right game, but showing you how to fix show rate or close rate is a really big component of having success. I'll talk through what we focus on in our company. So there's two metrics that we really care about. The first is a cost of a booked call, and the second is actually a performance-based metric, which is cash collected per booked call. And these two numbers basically help us assess sales performance and then also marketing performance. On any given day, we can see, okay, right now we're booking calls for $70 and our sales rep is making, let's say, $700 per call, which is not a bad return. That's a 10x return in terms of the marketing spend itself. So just be careful when focusing on looking at these numbers, not to get confused by it. Really what you want to identify is, well, what does it cost me to book a call? And bear in mind, if you're not spending dollars on your marketing, what you're actually spending is your time, right? And so there's really just two currencies that you have. And so if you're not doing paid marketing, actually work out how much time it's costing you for a booked call and what the return is on that time. And that's a pretty easy thing for you to assess. You basically just work out, well, how much time am I spending on marketing, right? So let's say you do 15 hours, right? And then how many calls did that book? And so if you booked, let's say 15 to 20 calls, let's just say 20 for easy math here, right? Not to make it confusing. And you spent 20 hours, then one call costs you 1 hour, right? If you work out that from those 20 calls, you actually sold 3 deals, a 5K valuation per deal, you made 15K. And now you can actually work out your hourly rate, which would be 15,000 divided by 20. And so not only are you able to calculate how much time it's costing you to get calls or deals, but you can actually calculate what your time is worth. And so we know in that example, 1 hour is worth $750 inside of the business. So really important metrics for you to be able to actually quantify where you're at with marketing and what you need to do to get more throughput. So anyway, I want to take you guys through our SendBlue process, which is how we're booking more sales calls. So really quick understanding of this as to why we implemented this. So we book on average about 400 sales calls in a typical month. And when we book these 400 sales calls, typically what we have is in our business, because we send a lot of cold emails, we tell people the price up front. And so we want to do this because cold email is typically a quite low intent type of cold outreach. You're literally landing in someone's inbox and they've never heard of you before. And so what we do inside of that process is that, we send them an email, and then once they book on the calendar, we then get them going through to a confirmation page. We call this an FAQ page. And on that page is a video, and that video goes through the process and it also reveals the price. Now, we've tested different versions of this, a 2-minute video, an 8-minute video, right? And there's lots of different ways that you can go about it. But because of that process, we get about 30% of calls that cancel, almost as soon as they book in, because they watch this video, they're like, man, I can't afford to pay that, right? This is not the right call for me. And so of those 400 calls, we're actually having about 280 that are staying on the calendar. Now, when those calls stay on the calendar, we then want to make sure that they actually show up on the day. And previously, we were actually getting about a 50 to a 55% show rate. So we would have around about 140 to 155 calls that would show on the day, right? That was about a 50 to a 55% show rate. And so what I want to talk to you about today is why we changed this process and the impact it actually has on revenue, because typically we'll have anywhere from a 10 to a 15% close rate for those showed up calls. And so if we're taking 140 calls and we've got, let's say, a 15% show rate, a close rate, then that's about 20 deals that we would be getting to have. We'll come back to that in a second, because this number is going to be big when we look at the difference in terms of the performance with what we're doing. So what did we change? Well, before we were doing a regular SMS automation with Allaware. You guys may be familiar with this. It's just a texting platform. It's what's called A2P, right? And what we're actually changing to is an iMessage process. And we're doing this through a tool called SendBlue. It's actually about $1,000 a month. That's what you would typically pay for a service like this. If you want to have a connection with them and maybe get a slightly better deal, just message me and I'm happy to connect with you. You can just message me on Instagram at Jamie Atkinson. And when you use SendBlue, what's kind of cool about this is that it's actually what's called P2P, peer-to-peer. And so with a P2P service, it's done through message, not through texting. And so first of all, there's a lot less compliance around it. It's a lot less challenging in terms of getting things approved, and there's a lot less hoops that you have to jump through. But the other thing is that people are going to be way more likely to respond because you're using an actual iMessage texting platform, the Blue Bubble. And the Blue Bubble is the key thing that makes this work really, really well. And so you got the Blue Bubble versus the Green Bubble. The thing with Green Bubbles, guys, is a lot of people get automatic text messages nowadays. And so typically what you're finding is that people over responding to text messages, if you get a Green Bubble, they're just going to assume it's a robot. They don't think it's a real person. Whereas when you send a Blue Bubble, it's an iMessage conversation. People are like, oh shit, this is actually a real person from the team that's texting me, which is huge. And it's really important, by the way, that you stay integral to that inside of this solution. There's a lot of people who will completely automate the process. We just automate the on-ramp to get people their first couple of messages in a speedy amount of time. You want to make sure that you're actually having a real person respond to these messages inside of this process. So what's the benefit of doing this? Well, the benefit is typically you're going to get better show rates, you're going to get better engagement, and when you get better show rates and better engagement, ultimately you get more buy-in. And so one of the biggest things that's really important for people to understand about pre-call communication is that you actually raise the interest levels of customers when they come in. And so typically what you've got these two charts. One is time and one is interest. So when a lead comes in, we're typically at a very low level of interest. Now, if your sales call is over here, you might get them from being just curious to kind of interested, actually interested, right? And then ultimately at the top here is where the sale happens when they're convicted, right? They're actually believing that this process is for them. So you might have no pre-call communication. Arguably, interest level drops when that's the case. And then on the call, the salesperson works their ass off to get the person kind of interested, but they haven't got them, in between this gap between convicted where the sale actually happens and where they are. What I mean by that is at this level, they're kind of like a 7 out of 10. And so if they get off that first call and they don't buy, between then and the next call, the interest level actually drops. And then on that second call, they've got to take them from kind of interested, right, all the way up to convicted again in order to get the sale happening. What happens, and I'm going to put this in green when you have pre-call communication, is you get somebody that comes in at the same level, but in a shorter space of time, you're able to communicate with them and the interest level increases. If you're able to get them to consume content, it increases again. If they're able to ask questions then about that content and you gave them more value, they're getting more interested. And by the time the call actually happens, this high frequency of communication actually means that the final stretch where this first call happens, you can actually get them to the point of being convicted enough to buy. And this is one of the hidden things that most people don't understand. When it comes to pre-call communication, it's not just about show rate, it's actually about making sure that you have a high level of interest. Now, if you have a low show rate and you have a low level of conviction on the front end, maybe you're just doing ads or you've got people coming in kind of cold, Imagine the same thing happens. They come in kind of curious, but then they don't really get any communication from you. Well, their interest level drops. Now they're not really even curious anymore. And this is where a deal no-shows. This is where they have no level of curiosity or interest anymore. And so they're not even going to bother showing up to the call. So this is what we're trying to accomplish with the pre-call communication process. So let's go through what this actually looks like. So in SendBlue, what we're doing is we've got two types of deals that we're actually going to be sending across. I'm going to make my face a bit smaller here. The first type of process that we've got is an onboarding process. This is a pre-call communication that's actually going out when a deal books in. So they book in, we assign it to the user. So this would be the salesperson. We give it 5 minutes and then we immediately send a double text. This first message is all about showing up in iMessage itself as a verified user. And so if you send a text message from iMessage that says, "Hey John, it's Jamie with Need a Guest," what's going to happen is if you call that lead or if they receive a text from that lead and they get a notification, iMessage is going to associate you with that name that you put in the first message. And it's going to say in the message header or the call ID, maybe Jamie. And so this actually sends a message to the iPhone provider to help you actually get recognized. And then we have a wait time for 5 seconds. That's where this ... exists. Right? And then we're going to ask a simple open-ended question to get them to engage and respond. So we sell a podcast booking offer. So we say, just saw your booking come in. Have you been on podcasts before? This opens up the conversation and it really gets them to reply. So we'll wait 90 minutes. After they reply, if they reply, we're going to wait a few minutes. Then we're going to send them a short video, right? I'll show you that video in a second. We say, I'm going to send you a short video. We then send them the video. And then after that video has been sent, we wait 10 seconds and then we send them the link to our video. And this is the confirmation page video that we have. You could also send them to a VSL video. It's like, hey, I want you to watch this call. I want you to watch this video before our call together. This basically increases consumption. And what happens is after the first conversation happens, so what this does is when you send this video across, you can actually just send them over to your VSL or your thank you page video just to get them to consume that content. Now, what happens is if they don't respond, we just have a small wait step here where we'll then send them a follow-up message. Typically, it's going to be like, hey, this is John, right? And I'm just making sure that we're trying to get them to engage. We wait for the reply. And again, we're going to wait for, a couple of hours. And then basically, if they don't reply, this just goes through to the sales rep. If they do reply, then we're going to send them that video as well. Same process as before. So this pre-call communication process is really designed to just on-ramp the salespeople. What we then have is within SendBlue, which is the tool that we use, we're able to have the sales reps actually communicating in real time. They get notifications. It's just like having an iMessage. And then the sales rep's job is to raise interest levels pre-call and to ask very specific questions. And so we'll ask questions like, okay, cool. Have you been on podcasts before? If they say yes, it's like, great. How did it go? How's that working for you in terms of, the success? What's got you interested in podcasting? What are you doing for marketing right now? We're asking curiosity-based questions to understand a picture of where they're at. And we're typically going to either get them to prepare stuff for the call. Great. Sounds like this is going to be the area of focus. Bring this, this, and this to the call. Or in other situations, we're going to be like, hey, I actually think this would be valuable for you. Watch this video. So this is generally a pre-call process that works great. The benefit of doing this onboarding process is twofold. One, you're actually able to get an iMessage style message that goes out quickly. So that high speed to lead creates fast response rates. Typically, you're going to see about a 90 to a 94% response rate to this initial message that's going out. A lot of people will watch that video. And then a lot of people are also, when they're watching that video, going to then follow through and watch the FAQ page. It's going to raise that interest level pre-call. And this works very, very effectively. And so that's the main benefit here. Speed to lead, the iMessage communication. And what this does for the business is actually it does a lot. So if we actually look at the sales calls that we were taking earlier and we apply these principles, here's a couple of things that are going to happen. One, because the message, all 400 of those sales calls are going to get messaged very, very quickly, and that interest level and that conversation is going to get started. Typically, you're going to reduce down the amount of cancellation rates because you're actually able to provide more value, provide more context, and actually get people to engage more. So typically, we see a decrease in the cancellation rate on the front end in our particular market of like 5 to 10%. Now, bear in mind, you may not even have have a cancellation rate for the way that you do your marketing. This is all going to be just benefit of higher show rates, but this is how it directly affects us inside of the business. So typically we'll actually end up on around about a 22% cancellation rate. This is what it was the last time we introduced iMessage into this kind of equation. So that sort of 8% of calls doesn't sound like a lot, but it's actually an extra 32 calls that we're able to get onto the calendar. So we go from 280 calls to actually ending up at 312 calls. Now, the other thing that's really cool is the show rate increases. So the last time we introduced iMessage into the mix here, we increased our show rate to 73%. So if you look at 312 and you times it by 73%, then that's actually 227 calls that you would then have showing up live to the call. For a comparison here, we're talking about 227 compared to 140. That's 87 extra sales calls that are actually getting onto the calendar from implementing a process like this. Bear in mind, if you're paying $100 or $200 to book those calls onto the calendar, it's like an extra 10 grand of marketing spend, maybe an extra 15 grand of marketing spend to get that improvement on show rate. Now, the other factor that's really powerful here is also because we're raising interest levels pre-call, we actually also tend to see an increase in close rate. And so the last time we did this, we were able to get our close rate from about a 13% on average to about an 18%. So we're able to see about a 5% lift in the actual close rate. And so just for comparison here, we've got 227 live calls on the calendar now. If we're able to get them to an 18% close rate, that's 40 deals that we're able to close. And so what I'm trying to explain to you guys here is that by increasing this show rate, reducing cancellation rates, and also increasing interest and awareness, realistically, this doubles the amount of deals that you close inside of this pre-call process. So I hope you use this in your business. I'll show you this video really quick just so you can see an example of it. But this pre-call video is very simple. It's 30 seconds. It really just gives a quick introduction.
Hey, this is Jamie from Being a Guest. Just wanted to send you this video based with a down before this call that you've got coming up. We're going to do a bunch of deep research into you, your competition, the brand. Really want to just make sure we've got the best podcast opportunities for you. Now, before we this might be more request. I want you to review this video. I'm going to send across.
All right, hope this is valuable. Now, if you want more of the specifics of, okay, what does this video look like inside of my business? What other things should I be looking at on my FAQ page to get better show rates? Please feel free to reach out to us down below. You can see the links down in the bottom of this video about what it takes to work with us. Please feel free to ask questions inside of the comments. So I'd love to give you some specifics on what this looks like for your business. Hope this is valuable. We just redeployed this in our company to increase show rates and raise those interest levels again. Hope this is valuable. We'll see you on the next video. Subscribe and like if you're enjoying these videos.